All right, here we are. Back. Happy New Year. Been a few weeks, so I don't remember anything we talked about last time, but I guess we'll start with our normal intros. Jen Brazelli here.
Yeah, I'm still Kyle Godby in the new year, and this is still Field Notes from the Swamp. And we left off our last conversation on a cliffhanger. And it was a proper cliffhanger because it was almost like we separated the seasons with a couple week break there and finished up the year and moved into a new true season movement there. That cliffhanger, we were talking last time about how we learned a lot about this practice through experience, and then we learned sort of formally some of the theory and the methods, and then we were able to relate the two, and it's kind of what was resonant, why we kind of stuck to it, really. But my question on the way out the door last time, some of these things that are important that we have to do, we have to be willing to do things very differently than what you typically find in most large organizations. We have to be able to say, we're going to be comfortable with a bit of ambiguity. We're going to go in and do some work, but we're not going to have a predetermined outcome. But the fact that we're going to be working together means that something will come of it. That's one example. I'm sure we can come up with a couple other dozen examples. We have to go into research with more questions than answers, with very, very, very broad hypotheses, where it's not like, can we prove our hypothesis and put language in people's mouths, that kind of stuff, through simple surveys. But can we collect stories and let people kind of speak for themselves? So we do that through a bit of friction and against a lot of norms. That there's an experiential component to that. Then there's, yes, this is good work and we know why. So my question on the way out was, do you remember, was there a time that you adopted that or pivoted on that, or you found the value of that gave you the sort of, I don't know, the energy or the stamina to be able to move against that norm that ask for simple returns and predetermined outcomes and that sort of stuff?
So we might spend the majority of this clarifying the question. And
Sure.
that stupid quote that gets attributed to Einstein, and spend the first 55 minutes of the hour framing the problem and then 5 minutes solving it. So I hear the part about, is there a moment or like a switch that happened, which I already think for me is a no, but then that's worth unpacking if that's true.
Mm-hmm.
B, I want to hear a little more about, are you curious? And this isn't really just truly to satisfy Kyle's curiosity, but like, is this topic of use for others to reflect on? Is it about becoming comfortable with indirect and non-engineerable approaches to things? Is it about comfort with ambiguity more broadly? Is it about, you mentioned energy and recognizing that working this way in the modern world, especially in corporate and for-profit environments, also means you're kind of always maybe not working uphill or swimming upstream, but you have probably some extra energy expenditure just to maintain this orientation in the face of broader habits and practices. So I want to hear more from you about the nature of the question, if you are up for it, in that I'm curious about how to triangulate what it is you're curious about. The individual comfort with things, how did you build the muscle to resist or to hold your space? Is it like, which of those, if any, if not, or maybe I've misunderstood it altogether and there's other things to add?
No, the answer is yes. Like, the cheap answer is yes. All of the above. It is.
This is why people don't like complexity practitioners.
I know. We love all the things.
Like, no boundaries. Fine, everything.
Yeah. It isn't a one-to-one. It isn't just one of those things.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, it's I'm willing to put my back into this, so I need that energy.
Yeah.
But I also see some good in it, and I also have some confidence that this is worth it, that I'm
Yeah.
taking some risks doing this. And so how does that all come together? Because I hear from practitioners all the time, know that they are jumping off the tracks, and there's a lot of fear to do that. It makes sense, they're attracted to it, but at what cost, is a really good question a lot of times. And I don't know that I've ever done that cost evaluation myself. So something must have happened somewhere where it was like, this is just my fate. This is just how this is just where I fit into this. I don't know.
Well, when you pose it that way, like the jumping off the tracks, at some point you have to jump off the tracks.
Hmm.
And either you've done some cost calculations and decided it was worth it, or you just didn't and something else triggered the jumping of the tracks.
Yep.
Was it conscious? Was it something was on the tracks that you had a collision with? Like, let's really abuse this metaphor. But as soon as you used that metaphor, literally the thought that went through my head was, I don't think I ever felt like I was on the tracks, which is
Yep.
partly why I was like, I don't know if I had a moment, but I like thinking about this to like interrogate whether that's true or not. So I think about, um, why am I like, I don't think I was ever on the tracks. And then it's like,
Yep.
what are the tracks? Like, Jesus, we have to unpack. I don't really want to get into this like giant academic exercise around what this metaphor is, but
Hmm.
I would say that I entered the working world as an adult already feeling like someone who did not understand. Well, I understood perfectly well, but I did not already kind of accept that the ways of working that we love to villainize and just refer to as a monolith, mechanistic,
Hmm.
Newtonian, blah, 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 management
Yeah.
science. Like, let's all just like very ham-handedly like refer to all that as the bad stuff and go black and white.
Right.
But no, I just never. I entered the working world as an adult without buying into that. Now I have to ask myself
Hmm.
why, and this might turn into like a weird tell me about your mother kind of session. But I
All
mean,
right.
I think that I did learn certain perspectives on work and labor from both my parents, who were working adults and were not like radicals in any form, but who both encouraged me to think for myself. And maybe in a nice way, I could say, as a tribute to both my parents, they played different roles in that process. My dad was very much the type to say, if you don't agree with someone who's an authority figure, you're not beholden to do what they say. And that's kind of a weird thing to instill in your kid. He never said that explicitly, but he modeled it for me and he taught
Hmm.
that to me, implicitly through responses to different things and situations I got myself into. And he was like, you'll face a consequence, but if you want to stand up to your teacher or you want to do this absurd thing, you have to, it's more important that you go by what you think and feel is important by your convictions. You will have a consequence, but that was what he was kind of reinforcing. And then my mom was really good at reinforcing that she'd never have this language, but plurality. There's many ways of knowing and being and doing things, even though she's alive, but she's retired. They're both retired. Woman
Hmm.
of science in the sense that she was a pharmacist for 40 something years.
Hmm.
And so cared deeply about the chemistry and the pharmacology
Sure.
of pharmacy, but she was a retail pharmacist. So she also cared deeply about the experience on the other end of what a pharmacy does for people in terms of,
Hmm.
you know, facilitating wellness and care for those folks. And I remember her telling me many times that she chose to be a pharmacist rather than she wanted to go into like the caring professions, but she chose pharmacist over doctor or nurse because she liked being in a pharmacy setting. She could come out from behind the counter, as the olden days, you can't do this anymore, thanks capitalism. I mean, she'd come down into the aisle and talk to somebody about the choices they're choosing between two products or whatever. If it's over the counter, she would talk about her prescriptions that she was filling for someone. And you think a pharmacist is just counting pills and making sure there's no dangerous interactions between drugs, but I would encourage anybody who's not super well acquainted with like the actual spirit and history of the pharmacist profession And think about it in relation to a lot of things we talk about. So I bring these up not to just be like, shout out mom and dad, but because I think there is something to be said for the values or the ways in which you are, not necessarily values that are just instilled in you from like an upbringing, kind of cultural, social in-group, those kind of things that are modeled as safe or not safe. So my mom caring a lot about human experience and well-being, but also making it very safe for me and my brothers to be weirdos. I was a kid who, as a girl, was a tomboy. I guess I'm probably still a tomboy. I don't know. I think that's a problematic term, I suppose. But, you know, early on in a young girl's life, I wanted to buy like Chuck Taylor shoes and I wore jeans and shirts. And one time my mom was like, do you want to buy something more feminine? Like when we go school shopping? And I was like, no. And that was it. She didn't ask again. She wasn't like, I'd like to see you in a frilly dress, you know? I'll wear frilly dresses now by my own choosing, but partly because I got to come to that place on my own agency and on my own terms. So my mom did a lot of really subtle things that signaled to me that it's okay if what you want to be or think or do is different than the norm. And she would adopt phrases that my brothers and I made up about that, you know, and even just like, there's no such thing as normal. My mom would just repeat that to me all the time. And then dad would be over here like, you don't agree with whoever's in charge? Fuck them. So it was like, that's why I was never on the track. But to that end, I mean, that doesn't mean that if you didn't grow up with parents like that, that like now, you know, you don't start off with the same like luxury or privilege of being able to work and think differently, because I still had to enter the working world like everyone else and navigate all of that. So for me, those aren't the reasons why I'm like comfortable with ambiguity, but I do think it's something to be said for. Now, replace my mom and my dad in that story with what other types of environmental or contextual or what other affordances exist in any given context that do what my dad did for me, what my mom did for me in a work setting, not like work dad or work mom, but like those were just two examples of affordances or, you know, things that made it possible for me to interact with the world in ways that got me very comfortable with not always needing to, I don't say follow because that's not the word, but to be really comfortable if I was in a situation where what I felt was the way to do something or the way to collaborate or the way to solve a problem or the way to seek an answer didn't look like what other people were doing. I was very comfortable with that from a very early age, probably because of them. So it was not a work environment or a school experience that did this for me. It was far earlier. I have more to say, but I'll pause there. I'm curious your reaction. I'm curious to hear from your side of it too.
I love that. I love that story. I'll say hats off to mom and dad, because yeah, this is how we talk about raising our kids. Is that there we need to invest in curiosity and confidence and compassion and really like the passing on what we know about navigating the structures of the world are going to be totally insignificant to them in a world that we have no idea what it looks like. But things like curiosity, compassion, and confidence will absolutely carry. But it's so fascinating that you're again, we're finding another one of those points where your story couldn't be more opposite of mine.
I have a fun story about it, and I'm curious if you want to tell your experience first, or do you want me to like illustrate a story? Okay, because I just thought of this. So I'm in elementary school, and I feel like I don't think I've told this story on this podcast before, but if I have, please stop me. I know I might have told this to you before, but in elementary school, we used to have something called field day in the spring. There'd be a day where instead of having normal school activities, we would all go outside and run around and play cool games in the field. And this was like K through 6, so it was like the whole school. We were a relatively small school, but you know, whatever. So it was this big day that was always really fun because it just felt like a free for all. Like, oh, instead of learning math, we get to go throw water balloons at each other. Whee! You know, and then there was always like the culminating moment of this day was that we would all gather in what is the gym / like assembly room. And we'd all sit in that room and watch on the big screen some kind of movie. Now, for all the years that I was there, the movie was always like Herbie the Love Bug or like Harriet the Dog or whatever, those old Disney films, like Bedknobs and Broomsticks, like movies that were made by Disney in like the 50s. So
Super safe.
like elementary school children in the 80s were like, what is this? You could not keep our
Right.
attention. We hated it. But
Yeah.
one year, I think it was my last year actually in the school in 6th grade, the gym teachers who organized this whole day, they spent like the whole 2 months in the lead up to field day hinting that we were going to watch like an actual movie that kids wanted to watch, like Beauty and the Beast, I think maybe came out that year. I forget, like a modern Disney movie, still PG, but either way, we were like led to believe that this year was going to be like a big awesome movie that we all like. Things were gonna, I'm trying to build some parallels here, things were gonna be different this year,
Yeah.
because we heard you guys don't like these old movies. And we're anyway, so they somehow choose to like lead us on to think this. Now what I don't know, and I'm sure I'm forecasting here what's about to happen, or there's definitely like a question in my mind of, did they think they actually were going to be able to show us, like a Beauty and the Beast or whatever, and then something fell through, or did they like never intend and they just got our hopes up for nothing? I don't know. Regardless, as you can imagine, you want to get a glass of water? Okay, I know you're still getting over
I'm
coffee.
good. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
So basically, as you can expect, the day comes. We have our field day activities. We all pile into this room. Everybody's like, the energy's buzzing. We're gonna watch a cool Disney movie, and like the movie that starts is like Herbie the Love Bug 2. Like the whole room, if you more upset, like 6-year-olds. It was like, and like most of the kids are just like, and so we all just like buckle down and say, okay, I'm going to sit on this uncomfortable floor for 90 minutes and tolerate this. But we're all bored because we want to watch the movie. So we're talking to each other, we're talking to our friends, we're chitter chattering. And like 10 minutes of this happens, and they go, two of the teachers walk up on the stage, they pause the movie, and they're like, you're all being extremely disrespectful right now. You're all talking through this movie and give us a whole lecture. Instead of just letting us talk for 90 minutes, they give us a lecture because we're not watching this movie, which is not at all the thing they promised. And they were like, and on top of all of that, today is Mr. So-and-so's birthday, like the gym teacher's birthday. You're hurting his feelings. And I'm sitting there in my 6th-grade brain thinking like, this is insane what is happening right now.
Right.
And kids are just still chitter chattering. And they go, you know what, guys? Any of you would rather go back to the classroom than be here and enjoy this movie. This is a special thing we're giving to you. And if you want to reject this gift and you want to just go back to the classroom and sit in silence, if you'd rather sit in silence than watch Herbie the Love Bug Part 5, go. And like the room is silent. Everyone's looking around at each other. I stood up. I was like, they made an offer. I don't want to watch this movie. I'd rather just go sit and look out the window. I figured I'd get a book and read. They didn't know what to do with themselves, of course. They were kind of like, oh shit, someone called our bluff. I wasn't being super disrespectful about it. I was just like, they gave me a choice.
Right.
So I walk away to the edge of the room. One of the teachers is clearly like, what do I do with her? They let me go back to the 6th-grade classroom. I heard later a few other kids stood up too, whatever. And then they showed the rest of the movie, and the rest is history. In the classroom, they made me write a letter of apology. They were like, write a letter of apology to the gym teachers. And I wrote in the letter, I'm not apologizing because I don't know what I'm supposed to apologize for. I was given a choice and I made that choice. And I also made the choice I made because of the way that you guys set up the day. Like you set these expectations and then wildly, deliver them. Not like I have no problem with anything that unfolded, and I don't know why you do either. Like I wrote the 6th-grader version of that. I went home that day thinking I was going to get in big trouble. I'm assuming they called my parents. I was a pretty good kid, so I never like got in trouble, but I thought I was going to get in real big trouble. I never heard a word about it. And I know that's because they called and my parents were like, this is horseshit. Y'all can fuck yourselves. So that to me is a really good example, because even though neither of my parents said anything to me, the lack of saying anything to me, and it came up later and we would talk about it and stuff. So I know they knew, but my dad later was, he did confirm. He's like, yeah, I would have done the same thing, kid. So there were things like that modeled, and it doesn't always need to be an explicit, these are our values. This is what you're empowered to do. This is how we take in the world. This is how we work together. A lot of times it can be the absence of something. And so that is a good illustration of how they actually, in this case, modeled it for me. And I started at a young age to test some of those limits. And all I got were reinforcing results that said, this is okay. You can function in this way. You have to just kind of figure out how to operate in those margins where when you really go a little too far, it's an affordable loss and not a threatening loss. So okay. There, that's all.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's good to hear. I wonder I wonder what my kids are going to rebel against. I feel like it's just part of kids' nature. But when you kind of give them a lot of like slack, like this morning I'm doing the drop off round and we're listening to Judas Priest and Dio, and they're loving it, and they're like they're already kids that have, I don't want to say open boundaries, but
Yeah.
they're already
Where are
like,
they going to find the thing to push against? They have to find like,
right.
a wall. I mean, their rebellion might be that they reject all of that and decide to like very superficial, very pop, very mainstream music, or they might say we hate board games and we never want to play them again, or like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to
We don't
happen.
want to we don't want to read. We want to, I don't know,
Yeah.
we're going to play golf. It's, yeah, there'll be something. But yeah, I'm always wondering what
Yeah.
that culminates into.
Well,
And I will never know.
I want to hear your side now here, of course. But before
Yeah,
we do that, I mean, for any listeners who are like, okay, why do we care about this? I mean, to
right.
me, it's easy to connect the dots, but for others who don't have my entire life history also informing that context, just think about the parallels with like what my parents had within their grasp or their reach or their sphere of influence, right? And what they did and didn't choose to do, and also how conscious they were of what they were doing. They were mostly just living out
Yeah.
their values and then reinforcing for me that there are ways of orienting yourself to the world that can be in caring and compassionate sort of posture, but yet still being willing to stand against whatever a social norm or other kind of directive might be asking you to do. You can be caring and compassionate for humans at the same time as fighting against what like groups of humans are asking you to do for them. And like that tension was just modeled for me in a way that, that they moved through the world. If you can't, consciously do it, I would encourage anybody listening to like think about it over the next couple weeks. Like, where in your life are you in that kind of a position? And who do you have that influence over if it's not directly a child in a
Right.
professional setting? You know, who are the Monica and Phil Brazellis in the workplace, and what are they making possible for the Jen Brazellis in the workplace, and which one are you
Mm,
and all that. So I just think it's an interesting thing to think about from the parallel structure of how you work with the substrate. You can model things and you can work with the affordances without having to make it a direct, here are our values, here's our
right.
mission statement, right? Like, here's how
Right.
we work. We as a company work this way or whatever. It comes a lot more down to like literally what you do and how it's visible and how things are enacted. So
Uh, we had this. I'm going to tell a quick story, and then
yeah,
I'll get into a little
tell
bit
a
more.
not quick
But
story. This is
because
our
I love this
podcast. It goes long as
modeling, this modeling bit is great. We had this thing at Capital One, the start of the pandemic. It was called, I think they still have it now, but it's called Invest in Yourself Day. I think it was the first Friday of the month, was Invest in Yourself Day. And what does that mean? Well, we're not giving any real clarity on it. It just means invest in yourself. Okay, so depends on which part of the org you were in. That meant different things. Um, some people, like, I talk to people all over the place, and they're working until 6 o'clock on that Friday, and they've got a full, like, all their meetings are piled up on Fridays like normal, and everything else. Um, and they'd ask questions like, isn't it supposed to be invest in yourself day? And the answer was like, yeah, but you know what that means, right? It's like, just make sure you take care of yourself. Take some time for yourself during the day, but also make sure you're at 7 hours worth of meetings and you get everything done, and put out all the fires and all the bullshit, that kind of stuff. The first time we had one, our chief design officer, who I miss dearly, she that following Monday, she comes in and says on our big Slack blast to the whole org, here's how I spent my day. I spent the first 2 or 3 hours getting caught up cleaning out my inbox and doing a little bit of organizing in my workspace. I went for a hike, and then I spent the afternoon doing yoga and reading books that I wanted to read. And that's how I spent my uh, my invest in yourself day. And the rest of us went, I know what I have permission to do now. I
Mm-hmm.
know where the boundaries seem to
Mm-hmm.
be. And it was top down. And ever since then, that's been a sort of like, this is how we need to model those sort of
Yeah.
things at the edges, from the edge, not necessarily I don't know, this is what I would do necessarily, but I
Yeah.
want to show
Yeah.
how far I think this can go.
Well, what's important to that? because I know this probably happened, is a leader modeling, not just saying, permission, but I'm going to do
Right.
it too. There's still going to be in
Yep.
some people's minds, well, fine, she can do it, but I can't,
Right.
the real moment comes in after you've heard that or read that and said, okay, she's basically saying that I can do the equivalent, is when you try it, when somebody tries it, when
Yeah.
somebody does the equivalent of standing up and saying, I don't want to watch Herbie the Love Bug. Or we had this actually kind of as a factor quite a bit at MadPow, where we had, unlimited or flexible time off, whatever phrase they like to
Mm-hmm.
use. But it was back in the day, it was nowhere near as common. And so it was a little bit weird for people to get to that point where they're like, okay, I can actually just take time. Like I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, everybody realized people were not taking time the way they should be. And so the effort was, managers need to model it and take the time off and show people it's okay to take full weeks or whatever. But that's not the magic happens when the first person who isn't a leader or has some level of privilege, who has less of that, try it, and they don't get
Yeah.
their hands slapped. Or if they do,
Right.
it's manageable, at least in my case as a kid. But like, right, those
Right.
moments, like with your children, there's going to be some point in time. The really, really good thing is going to not just be that you've tried to instill curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and confidence. The really, really good stuff's going to be when they do finally defy you in some
Right.
way, like a meaningful, big way. Your
Mm-hmm.
response is going to be the key. And so when
Right.
you took your invest in yourself Friday and really literally stopped working after 10 a.m., if you didn't get in trouble, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
There it is, right there.
Yeah. I remember a buddy of mine, he's a software engineer. He's wanted to give his son all sorts of um, these learning modules on how to program, and he's like 10 years old and he's writing mods for Minecraft and all of this. The kid's a wizard.
Yeah.
And at 12 he gets grounded, and so dad, being the wizard that he is, puts a VPN, locks him down at the VPN level, um, uh, and the kid figures out a way to circumvent it. And dad comes back and congratulates him. This is what I've been trying to teach you. Like, this is
Bad.
yes, like I'm gonna be a like what kind of like, I kind of go back to that every once in a while. Like, yeah, like that. The punishment is still the thing. Like, I'm not punishing you for like,
Yeah.
the punishment is its own thing.
Right.
But I put an obstacle in front of you and you handled it brilliantly. Also, we need to talk about the reason why the punishment existed on its own. That's
Exactly.
a different story altogether,
Yeah.
but we can segment these things and talk about them. And hopefully he had a developed enough brain to be able to segment those things too, but
Even if
that's
not,
the risk.
you have to just keep doing it. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a repeated,
Right.
repeated exposure to the same information, right? That's how it works over time. But
Right. Yeah.
this is intriguing as a topic goes, because I don't think I would have probably really answered it this way off the top, right? It was taking a little bit of time to think through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are also other workplace examples that would have been those examples of reinforcing moments. Like I mentioned, MadPow had a lot of reinforcing moments that were positive ones, that were places where I could do the take a risk, see who's going to get mad, do something a little bit
Mm-hmm.
outside some protocol, although protocols were loose at best at MadPow in the best possible way. But I still would find little ways where I'm going to take a risk here. I'm going to maybe challenge this thing, not in like a defiance way, but in more of a just, I don't know if this is endorsed or sponsored by anybody, but whatever. And
Yeah.
over time, those just get supported in the right way, or
Mm-hmm.
directed in the right way. So like I've been in workplaces that reinforced all of this, and then I've also been in places that were the opposite. And I will very briefly, without getting into the details, say I spent time at a large ed tech company that was, for the 6 months that I stayed, like crazy toxic. And the team I was on was awesome, but everything else was wild. We got to the point where we were just like, everything we're being told by leadership top down, like every day we had these directives and these calls and like the equivalent of all hands meetings. We were like, this is all just stupid. So we started investing our time in creating memes that were our way of processing and kind of emotionally handling what we were all going through, this like shared adversity, in the creative kind of like endeavor that is creating these very of the moment, of context memes and kind of one-upping each other and whose meme was most creative. And we didn't like only do this. But
Right.
after a while, it went from being something we did secretly in our private little channel, in our Skype channel, or at our desks, literally in person. We started printing them out and hanging them up where others could see. And if leaders walked through, they would see them. And like we basically just kept, like in Jurassic Park, like systematically testing where the fences are electrified or not.
Yeah.
And we slowly learned that they weren't. And so it all goes into that same category of if you're the fence tester, keep testing because that's how this works. Find where the fences are not electrified. And then B, if you're the one who is running Jurassic Park, maybe think about it a little bit. Anyway, so let's hear your side. It sounds like it's totally the opposite of mine.
Totally opposite. So yeah, my folks were very like straight arrow, like you do what you're told kind of thing. We don't question why.
Ours is but to do and die.
Yeah, my old man from a military family, my mom from a first generation immigrant family of Italian Catholics. It was like asking questions in both of those scenarios was something you just don't do. You go to school, you pay attention, and that's it. End of story. And I didn't do that very well because there was no way that I wasn't going to ask questions. But kids don't have identities. They get either identity from the people around them, and when you're just told that the thing you do naturally, you ask questions and you wander, and that those things are bad, those things are make you a bad kid, you kind of just like steer into that identity eventually, and it causes you to do other bad stuff because you kind of do well. All right, well, the other bad kids get into fights, and the kid, they
I'm a bad
swear
kid.
at
What do bad
teachers,
kids
and
do? Do what the bad kids
yeah,
do.
exactly. Bad kids flip off the teacher. I guess I'm going to flip off the teacher, like that kind of stuff. And I got in trouble for all sorts of stupid stuff like that, also. But I got comfortable. Knowing that I live outside, off the rails, not through encouragement, but through this sort of negative reinforcement of, well, you're just like, it wasn't, to them, it was a like, stop doing the thing. To me, it's not a thing, it's a me. I didn't know much else about me. I just knew that this was a compulsion that was unavoidable. And so, there was definitely a time when my music and sound and production career was drying up, and this was post 9/11. We didn't think that we were going to enjoy any of these things anymore, and I was thinking, all right, I have to go into a corporate office now. I played the part for a bit. There was probably a couple years there where I said, I'm going to go like buy my nice button down shirts, and I'm gonna play ball with everybody, and I'm gonna play the game and see what
Hold
happens.
out, Kyle.
I did. I didn't think there was another way. And well, I was reading it on the inside. This is when I was like pushed into like the Six Sigma world and the lean world and all that kind of stuff. And on the side, like all my friends were in like the web design and the creative space and whatnot, but I'm over here in web e-commerce and web merchandising and whatnot.
Yeah.
Kind of just going, all right, this is not my tribe. This is not the work I want to be doing. I'm not part of this. But I think I had to burn myself out there first before I was able to finally say, all right, fuck it. And it didn't serve me very well at first. In fact, it probably took a long time before it did. I had to find a kind of balance between fuck it and totally selling out. That was a rough few years of trying to navigate that space. But a big thing, and I think we were talking about this last time, part of the continuation of this arc was what was there was never really serving me to begin with. I was never really in or on the tracks I was trying to get on, and so it was more comfortable to be off. But again, not because like even like the stuff I would show up, I'd like talk to my folks and be like, this is what I'm doing at work. They want to do this. I told them that that's not going to work. We should try this instead. And they're like, are you going to lose your job? I hope not, but I don't know that I like.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm doing this in a way that isn't antagonizing anybody too much, but like if they want me from the neck up, this is the shit that's going to come out of my mouth because that's how my brain works, and this is my contribution. If they're interested in talent and personality, then that's it. If they just want warm bodies to lift boxes and move them across the room, then that's not the role, but B, I'm not that person. And so if they fire me, then that's because we're not supposed to be together. That's fine.
Yeah.
But it definitely took a lot of figuring out where that right line was. Also earning a bit of credibility after playing the game for a little bit before I could kind of let it fly.
Yeah.
And again, that was a lot of calibration. That was at some point, like I definitely think that my career grew slowly because of the time that I invested in that. Not that I think that it could have gone a different way. I don't think I could have just gone, oh, I'll just play the game a little bit longer. It's just, again, it's not in my nature.
Yeah.
But there was never a time that I was comfortable on the tracks that I said, all right, I'm going to take a risk now and step off.
So here's what I just wrote down, because this sort of came out of when you summarized it as, well, like, when did you jump off the tracks or whatever, jump the track? And my response was like, I don't think I was ever on them. And yours were like, I might have been on them, but I was never comfortable on them, so there was no way I was going to stay on them. I had the wheel on my train was already like this. I mean, I would almost pose to anybody who watches this, like, were any of you ever on the tracks? And then my next question is, who's actually on the tracks? I don't know that any human, as a living, adapting organism, has it in their innateness to be on tracks. And that the trackness of like modern working is actually not a function of humans having experiences that gain unnecessarily confidence or trigger us to be in or out of that. But like, as we always talk about how context dependent it is, because the other part of the prompt or the cliffhanger that we opened with around, like, people being comfortable with ambiguity and all of those things we always kind of skate around. The answer to that, as we always hammer, is the context dependence of it. And, I'm extremely comfortable with ambiguity, but I still have places where I don't want the ambiguity. I don't want my doctor to be ambiguous with me. I don't want the guy who is going to repair my car to be like, well, we'll just obliquely approach this and hope a better engine emerges, There are and so I know those are easy, like, even in corporate settings, there are aspects of corporate work that I don't want to be ambiguous, or that I don't think any human should be required to accept ambiguity on, right? So there's this level of like the jumping of the tracks that in and of itself, where are the tracks? Kyle, the tracks are in the context, right? So I just,
it's a good point.
Kind of funny to think about, not to be, again, the insufferable.
No, you're not wrong. It's interesting to think about, because then we talk about, I go into the organization and I'm swimming upstream against these track. I'm now mixing metaphors again, but we're on the wrong tracks, going in the wrong direction.
Hand cart pushing the wrong
We're headed to a head-on collision and a derailment, because we're bringing it the opposite.
The light at the end of the tunnel is another train. Yes, this is true.
Right. So what we're running up against is the not just and I think we've said this before. I think there are a lot of people that are saying, I don't know that this is serving me or what we're trying to do at the moment. But here's another metaphor. I'm in the river and it's moving, and I can't necessarily just, on the train and it's moving, I can't necessarily just jump off. So their ability to jump the tracks is just not necessarily there. And so that says there are tracks. And people are on them, whether they want to be on there or not. All right.
No, and I'm just being
we're having fun with this. Yeah.
But to your point, I think that like the notion of there being rails or tracks that you're on, is a marriage between individual and context, or individual group,
Mm-hmm.
the fractal nature of these things being like recursive in terms of like the people reinforce that there are rails you have to be stuck on. And yet the business is this amorphous thing that is, so these obviously all they're entangled. But I was thinking too, as you were just chatting, it's a little bit like, I don't know if you ever went to amusement parks. Most people I know have ridden like bumper cars or are familiar with bumper
Sure.
cars, like a carnival, and think about like bumper cars. You have some level of freedom to drive the car wherever you want, but it's like contained within like the
Yeah.
box of the thing. Think then about a different ride. Not all places have something like this, but like a ride where you are driving a car, but the car is on a rail. I'm thinking dearly now about Kennywood for my Pittsburgh folks. There's like the Turnpike, which is where you basically are in an old timey little like Model T kind of car. And like this is a kid favorite because you're actually driving on a little road that goes like through the park, which is pretty cool. But the car is on a track, it's on a rail. So you can steer the car, but you can't get too far. You'll hit the little rail and you feel yourself get corrected. But you are controlling the gas and the brake, and you do turn it. Like you, as the person driving, are expected to actually turn the car to follow the road. So you could drive the whole way and never feel the rail if you don't actually hit the edge of it. So, and if you contrast those two things, in one case, you have some level of autonomy or agency, whichever thing you want to go for here, that you get to enact driving the car, but you're still kept pretty tightly within the expectations of whatever this is. The other being the bumper cars, which are you can move anywhere you want inside this box and you can bump into each other and cause a little chaos. Right. Those are two really different forms of, actually, that would be a great way to illustrate scaffolding, the way that people are really into these days, right? About like the internal scaffolding of a skeleton or the external scaffolding of like, say, an exoskeleton as a constraint on the interactions that can happen that are supported by either of those dynamics. So that's kind of a neat thing to think about. But contrast both of those with just driving a car out on the open road. So I think that's a little bit of what is at play here. I think both of us came out of our early experiences in life feeling very comfortable, or either very comfortable being without the rail or the scaffolding altogether, or we felt uncomfortable when it was imposed on us. And probably, those two things have different, but they lead to some similar place. That to me is an interesting dynamic to think about, so it's how folks develop enough actual embodied experience and practice and reps operating without the rail or the boundary of the bumper cars. You start with some level of rail or person driving with you or driving in a parking lot, right? And then expand what is your domain to interact without the rails. And then the rails that exist are purely in our heads. They're the norms of driving on the right and following, the stop signs and the stoplights. So this is a really rich, interesting thing to think about as a good, just an additional metaphor in the pot for people who need to get beyond the usuals. Because anytime somebody does lament, like, I just want to help all these corporate prisoners, get off the rails. There's a level of like that judgment that you've diagnosed all these people as on the rails because they don't have the courage to get off of them, or because they don't have the privilege or the ability. But like none of those might be true. Yeah. The only thing I was going to add, I had also jotted a note. You made a good point, kind of a tangent, but it's worth calling out. You and I both have done time in corporate environments. And I think having that experience is really important, not just for having empathy and having perspective on what it's like to work inside ye old company that people love to villainize for operating on tailorless, like all shareholder driven, profit motive capitalism. Oh, like, yeah. But I think to feel what it really is like to work inside these environments and not have this kind of like, y'all are complexity cowards. Like, I don't think anybody would say it explicitly, but God, that's implied in so much framing in this world. It's not like we're here to be the saviors. It's so much more about just finding some of those places where, in this part of the org, the tracks are all worn down and out of use, or you don't have to drive on the tracks over here, whatever. So I'm going to just stop extending that metaphor right now because it's about to be a problem.
Yeah, we can take that too far. Yeah, that's a good call. We that comes up often. I hear that in the frustration. Um, I've found myself talking about this a few times lately, where
Mm.
like, how do I talk about this more? How do I go into my stakeholders or clients, and what's the language I should use? And the frustration is, why don't they get it? And it's always pointed at
Yeah.
them. They've got some resistance to this. Why are they so averse? Why do they think everything works so uh, mechanistically? And uh, I I don't know. This is another one of those, what's the genesis sort of questions that I'm teeing up possibly. I don't know when it was that I kind of said, I can't keep pointing my finger at everybody around me and kind of going, why don't all of you get it? Why am I the only one that understands it? Um, Don Quixote over here. But instead, like, uh, how do I take this and actually use that to morph the way that I'm interacting and
Mm.
keep doing that? Now, there's a bit of like, that's stressful. You put all of that on your shoulder. I've got to find a language that resonates with a really wide open audience, multiple contexts. It's going to be on me to do it, but I think that that's part of the art of this,
Yeah.
is the ability to find ways to do that. And I think it just takes time and practice is more than anything
I
else.
think that's
But
all
it
it boils
can't
down
be, it's
to
them.
is, yeah, it's just finding ways to earn whatever is needed to help get the time and the practice in. And I don't just mean that in like the kind of, are we just talking coaching to help people? No, no, no. I
Mm-hmm.
mean like whole organizational, team collaboration, or the actual literal activities of the work, whatever the work is, it's design or
Right.
otherwise, like the work, not just the internal growing or whatever that people seem to hear when we talk about this. Um, it's just doing it and practicing it with like these tweaks that are indicated by how we understand complex dynamics unfold. And it's interesting you said, this could be another question about an origin or a moment. When I think about the fact that most people in any organization okay, like turn off the black and white caricature filter that we've kind of been applying for fun today on
Mm-hmm.
the mechanistic thinking kind of world or whatever.
Right. The drones.
Yeah. So like real humans who are all complicated inside real organizations, which are also complicated. Oh, sorry, I'm not using Cynefin complicated here. I just mean the like broad, it's
Right.
complicated.
Yeah.
We all contain multitudes.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just realizing right now, I think I've kind of always, or at least for a long time, recognized that people on the receiving end of this kind of consultative kind of approach like deserve some level of respect and understanding that they do get it, even if they, again, don't have the language for it yet. And I just realized right now, I had this experience when I left teaching and I was at CMU doing my master's in design. And I had like obviously some familiarity with design enough that I wanted to enter that program, but I'm immersed and I never really encountered anybody who was straight up like arrogant about this, but I realized very, very quickly in the very first semester of that program how much of what I had been doing as a teacher would qualify as experience design. And
Mm-hmm.
I had the inklings about that. It's why I moved into that world. I knew that even if I didn't have that language. And as a teacher, I did not have that language. I did not
Mm-hmm.
know the world of experience or UX design or any of that stuff existed until very late in my teaching career and was like, ooh, I'm intrigued by this. So every teacher I knew, at least the good ones, this was true for. And I remember like this was just so strongly reinforced in that first semester because so many of the things we did in those courses, the things we read, the things we explored and talked about together, some of them even drew on texts that were part of what would be like an educator kind of progression, whether you study it in school or just get certified and teach or whatever. So there were things we read in that master's degree program that I had already read, in teaching. And so I was like feeling very reinforced in this way. I was like, yeah, as a teacher, I do experience design, or I am designing learning experiences. People have heard me
Yeah.
say this all the time. But what I encountered was that was not a like widely held or understood notion. Like I had to explain myself a few times. It wasn't like that people were mean to me. My fellow students certainly understood it, but I definitely did bump up against the potential for people to say, "What?" And most people assume you come from a different career entirely and move into, say, experience design, service design, all that. You're learning something net new. Whereas for me, the experience was very much, I'm just adding language to what I had already picked up the craft to
Mm-hmm.
do in the classroom and now enhancing and expanding it, which is exactly the same thing we talk about with complexity all the time. But just right now, I'm starting to kind of connect like my experience of feeling the potential that other designers would peg me
Mm-hmm.
as a teacher who doesn't really get design until I've done my degree
Right.
versus my own feeling of myself and my understanding that, oh shit, everything I've been doing as a teacher is literally design as you're describing it.
Yeah.
And having that experience probably has made it easier for me to then now sort of put myself in the shoes of, say, a client, a team at an organization where I might be working. And I know that everybody on that team probably can see if I'm doing a good enough job when I talk about systems or complexity or anything else, because I don't just talk complexity all day long, but whatever I'm talking about, I know they can see what I'm talking about in the work they're doing. Because if they
Mm-hmm.
can't, then I'm doing a bad job at my job. And then I have to acknowledge and honor that. And I think that it's almost a reverse of the challenge that so many people do share with us about, like, I got to find the language. I got to, no, you got to find a way to talk about whatever it is you need to talk about in a way they can see
Mm-hmm.
themselves in it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about if they get it. They already get it. Make it so they can see
Right.
themselves in it, or better yet,
That's it.
experience themselves in it. So that was an interesting parallel I'd never really explored concretely. So cheers to that.
Uh,
That's fun.
yeah, that's good. I've never thought of it exactly that way, but I think that's the right way to frame it.
Kyle says it's the right
How
way,
they
everybody.
see
We're good. We're
themselves.
good. We got it.
I approve. Mint it. Let's go. No, yeah. I'm stealing that. Is more it. Um, yeah, where they see themselves in it is absolutely. I think the I say that a lot about when we're talking about change. The first thing to address is where are they in the future? How are they going to see themselves in the future? Have we made space for them in the future? That's going to be their big question. As we're talking about complexity and ambiguity, how they see themselves in it is an interesting way to approach that. I like that a lot. What was coming up for me reminded me a little bit of, brought me back to the conversation we had with Jeff Gold about generalists and our ability to move through different roles is not necessarily that we just jumped from one place to another, but we had ability to reframe ourselves and our experience in the context of the place we wanted to be next. And there were two things that I was just thinking of. One is I struggled with that at first, but part of it is I've been through 7 layoffs now. Um, Part of it is that I kind of had no choice. I kind of had to do that.
Yeah.
The role that you're in one organization doesn't necessarily translate to another role anywhere else, and it doesn't publicly transfer very well either. So you kind of have to figure out a way that you can use this in a common language, or figure out a language in the place where you might land to kind of relate that. So it was a trial by fire through a lot of layoffs that I had to kind of learn some of that. But also, there were times that I definitely needed permission to adopt language.
Yeah.
There were times that now that I can say I do research today, but
Yeah.
there were times that as a product owner, I could look back and reframe what I was doing and say I was doing research then. But then I would run into like some of the like clinically trained researchers in the UX
Mm-hmm.
space and go,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that I'm going to put myself up next to you. And it took a little bit for me having conversations with them to kind of say, here's what I'm working on. And them going, well, you're doing research. I mean,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Like that was all I needed. I really needed that, honestly, in a few instances, because I kind of didn't want to get called on that sort
Yeah.
of thing. and end up having to answer for it. And I think that's pretty natural. I think that's pretty but I think we have to be better. Designers, we're terrible about like our in language, and identifying each other with our in. As much as we hate in language, we absolutely abuse it to death.
Well, it's also a way of community building, and it's not all. It's,
Sure,
everything's both gatekeepy to keep things out, but
of
it's also
course.
to connect us to each other. So it's
Bingo.
yep.
Exactly. Yep. So we need to be better about that sort of stuff. But I don't remember exactly where that tangent, where it was headed, or where it jumped from. But that generalist component is, I think it's not just an innate sort of ability, or at least I don't think I didn't find that in myself. It was
No,
definitely
yeah,
relational in
yeah,
uh, understanding what other people were doing and finding some sort of permission. I had to be sort of accepted in other circles to kind of say, okay, I think I'm in here as well.
yeah.
I couldn't just push my way in certain doors.
Well, I mean,
There were some doors I maybe could have,
I think
but
that's one of I think that illustrates one of the tensions that does still exist around the idea of being a generalist. I think some people
mhm,
misunderstand the word as like it's just something everybody's a generalist, and like
right.
I think it's fair for the people who do make a battle out of this to make the battle out of it, which is to say, yeah, being a quote generalist, or whatever words you'd prefer to use in its place now,
Hmm.
is a sort of a skill or a craft or an ability or whatever that you cultivate. That it isn't
Hmm.
just, yes, all humans are born with like the innate potential. We're not born as specialists, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that that's how things unfold. There are people out there who are neither generalist nor specialist. Like,
Right.
what's the secret third other thing? So I just feel
Right.
like I think you've illustrated that. And it's the research example actually is an interesting one too, just because what you described, I think, is very common from a sort of confidence and confidence perspective, right? A feeling of belonging or inclusion when it comes to the actual either skill or craft or role or whatever, having permission, being recognized as a peer or practitioner, that kind
Hmm.
of thing, being allowed to engage in certain types of working. But the flip of that is also very true. I mean, in most professions, but especially in design, it's very visible and around the topic of who is allowed to call themselves a researcher,
Yeah.
democratizing research, as well as design,
Right.
and all of the tensions around design versus product versus others, even within design, UI, UX, whatever, right? So, like, I just find to me this topic always kind of comes back around to this that sense that you'll solve something with language, and you and I have talked at length, so we don't have to belabor it. But I've never experienced that getting the language right is going to solve all of your challenges, or even usually any of them.
Right.
The language is not the thing. So
Yeah. 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 This comes up. I mean, that's the answer. And again, this is going to be why people hate complexity practitioners, is when everyone sits down.
you know
How do we
what?
get
At
the
this
language
point,
right?
I already feel the
Can't do
time
it.
turning. Like, there's so much. How about the
Uh-huh.
hate on adaptation lately? Should we get into that, or maybe that's the next one? Whew.
Let's do it. We can swing into that one. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, wait. I should caveat this. Maybe we should go do homework first. I don't know. I don't actually know enough about this recent, and I say recent, like literally in the last week or two. I have seen more than one post calling out or suggesting that the concept of adaptation, which I think broadly in complexity circles is a good thing. It's represented as a good thing. We want to be more
Hmm.
adaptive. The notion of adaptation and the notion of adaptive capacity are sort of just like universally accepted as good things. I will just, for the record, say right in this minute, I am absolutely team adaptation. Like, I am pro for these terms as far as desirable, useful, um, generative, life-giving, innovative salt. Like, these are good things for me. Some of it might come down to how we define these words, which is actually where I think the source of most of this tension is that I think in the places where I am seeing people start to say, I want to be, a contrarian, and everybody who's been on and on and on about adaptation, y'all are just idiots. And it's actually, I think there's a little bit of narrowing of a word and its idea so that you can then carve out some other thing for yourself to be the champion of. I'm being very ungenerous in that because I am kind of accusing some of the people who are out there criticizing adaptation right now of doing that without actually having full understanding. So I will say right off the bat, I have not engaged with any of these individuals. And I have only seen some posts, some blog posts, article posts, some LinkedIn posts that have kind of just suggested that the word adaptation is problematic. And I have not had conversations or did not dive deeply into the rationale behind it. But I'll say this, and then obviously let's get into it. But like for anybody who's like, what the hell is Jen talking about? What I will say at the broadest terms, and then maybe you fill in if you think we need to for people to get it without naming names. I have seen some talk about adaptation, meaning you adapt to whatever's happening, and that ultimately leads to encouraging people and systems to always adapt, even if the thing they're adapting to is bad. So if adaptation is simply learning how to live in a dysfunctional world, then maybe adaptation is not a good thing. Well, like on the surface, duh, I agree with that statement too, but I think it's a very reduced, simplified version of the word adaptation, especially for people that are in complexity communities who are so used to thinking about things as both recursive as well as mutual. It made me stop and realize that I haven't thought about adaptation in that very basic biological sense, like take a thing and put it in a new environment and it adapts to the new environment. I haven't thought about adaptation in that very simple sense in a long time. For me, adaptation is mutual. I might adapt in relationship with another human, many humans, my environment, the community. And in my adapting, I'm also changing them and they're adapting. So it's mutual change, it's mutual learning. People who know me and hear my other crap know that I'm always on about how I actually think adaptation and learning are sort of each other. So my version of learning, when I think of the word learning, is that we are mutually adapting. But I just am really surprised to see, so to finish explaining, I think there's a little bit of interest in defining adaptation as simply when an organism or a system just figures out how to adapt and survive inside whatever it's placed inside, which can lead to just reinforcing logics of harm and abuse. And it can be, if that's how you're defining the word. And then there are alternatives that are posed, like instead of adaptation, would be talking about attunement, which I actually thought when I was reading about some of this, the argument was going to be, instead of adapting, it's the focus on changing and like going after and revolution and whatever, which itself again gets back to like direct approaches that are not all that effective. The other thing I've seen is just this adaptation that seems like the word is being used maybe just within agile or software development communities, like, are you talking about adaptation as in like whether your software architecture is adaptive or just even like the adaptive capacity concept, which has origins in biology and climate and sustainability, but like as a notion when it comes to systems, a system has, or a human is a system, adaptive capacity, and it always serves you to have greater, higher adaptive capacity. It doesn't mean you're always going to be required to adapt as a form of acceptance, something bad happening. It simply means that you yourself are not rigid. You are not stuck. You are not crystalline. Changes that change you won't break you. It's about being fluid. It's like being water. So anyway, water also pushes back on things, right? Like water flows and changes and like moves around things. Water also
shapes earth,
deep fucking grooves in canyons. So I have always thought about adaptation that way, and I did not know I had this much energy in me to like defend this word. But I just found myself like almost gobsmacked that I saw this in a couple different places in the last week. And so jokingly, when I mentioned it earlier, I mean, complexity is itself already having the anti-hype, kind of thing happen these days, which is good. It's part of the process. But I'm curious, like, what do you have to say about it? I don't necessarily want to mark myself the defender of adaptation, but I am the defender of like what I think the word should mean. So
I'm with you with less fervor, is kind of my position. Right. There's a bit in Nora Bateson's last book combining where she's talking about adaptation as being that mutual relationship. And she's specifically talking about moths and the patterns on wings. These things don't happen in isolation. There's no way that the moth could develop this camouflage without knowing the tree.
Yeah.
How that happens, still somewhat mysterious.
Yeah.
But this is a adaptation as a relationship between two things that now are mutually, somehow enhancing each other to an extent, at least. The where I've seen this pop up a lot is kind of what you were talking about. Is there is a toxicity, or the sort of way things are right now, particularly here in the States, we just need to get used to it. You need to form fit or assimilate to what it is, or else you're just going to drive yourself nuts. So somehow get comfortable with this. And the word adaptation has been applied to that recommendation, in which case I'm totally on board with people saying, hell no. There's no reason to be complicit for this. But I think adaptation is the wrong word. I think assimilate's the right word, probably.
Yeah.
I think we've done ourselves a big disservice by, I don't know if it's my generation. I find a lot of people that I talk to are quick to just say these two words mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Synonyms are too closely lumped together, and so we're too thoughtless with our synonyms. And so stuff like this gets lost sometimes. Adaptation is the wrong
I think
word.
that's it. I mean, it's basically what me seeing some of this out there has done is really kind of made me go, huh, is this a blind spot for me, in that I'm now realizing or learning that, I mean, the answer is yes. So yeah, it has made me realize it has been a blind spot that some people think of the word adaptation in that way. Like, I never recognized it. And I have been doing a lot of writing on, there's a little bit of a project happening for me on the topic of adaptive capacity. And it just made me realize that I probably should even make clear, when and if I write more about that, what I mean by adaptive capacity and what I mean by adaptation is not assimilation. It is not merely accepting and adjusting to something to live and survive it without challenging it. It's none of those things. And so it has really been eye-opening to see who is responding positively to this notion of all of you people who are always championing adaptation and adaptive capacity as like this great thing. There's also something to be said for the tone in which it's shared. Some have been very open and like inviting dialogue, and some have been a little bit more I've got you all now.
Right.
So there's a little of that. Like I said, I'm not really engaged in any of this. So I am making lots of assumptions. I have not had conversations with these folks, so I'm not as well immersed in the context. But there's definitely there will be more of these too for any field as it grows, as people kind of realize, okay, I can see this thread is something that everyone grabs onto, and adaptation is probably one of those words that people are kind of, emergence is another one, entangled is another one. So I think as people recognize the words and you see them used over and over and over again, there are going to be those people like 6th grade Jen who are like, hey, no, and they want to be a contrarian. And so it's interesting to observe that. I'm thinking, believe it when I saw it.
10 years ago, we lost empathy. When empathy is a great word, but it didn't just hold compassion. It started to hold pity and condescension and sympathy and too
or
much.
this implication that, it means having like literally the same life experience, or that it replaces having that, or like, that in turn means you don't have to actually include those folks in the, I just was like, we have to pack so much of like a straw man version of something into one of these words to fight against it. Why are you spending that energy? And then I realized when I asked that, I know exactly why, because people do still need in certain places and parts of the working world for their own ability to have an identity and sell work and make money and pay for their house and their children's food. Like you have to carve out a contrast for yourself. So while I think it's ill-informed and sometimes in bad faith, I completely understand the motivation. It's not like I don't understand it. I don't agree with it, but I do understand it. It's not a mystery to me. But
Oh,
yeah.
and this in language that I'm just complaining about is it does a lot of heavy lifting for
It
us.
does.
It
It does.
allows us to have heavier conversations in shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
So to an
I
extent,
mean,
of
I like
course.
this is basically me just putting a stake in the ground for anyone listening, for all 5 of our viewers. I just want you all to know you can claw adaptation out of my cold, dead, linear hands. Okay, like just that one, I'm not letting go of.
All right,
But I will say
we're
the mutuality of how adaptation actually happens. What's interesting to me, this is maybe the fun little twist on this. Aside from, I think, people mistaking adaptation for ideas of maybe assimilation, like you're fighting the wrong thing here. I also think to think of the word adaptation as something adapting to something else in it has a linear, one directional implication, right? So to be able to criticize or challenge the goodness of adaptation by implying that a thing is going to simply be changed by something else completely ignores the fact that if thing A changes thing B necessarily changes thing A.
mhm,
It's basically only the argument against adaptation is really only able to be effective if you ignore one half of that mutual transformational nature that is true for all things. And so I just get a little joy out of like, if you're in the camp of adaptation is a bad thing, your pants are down, So your complexity pants are down. We'll put it that way.
you're right. Yeah, isn't this
Well,
third
yeah.
law of
I was just about to
thermodynamics?
say, I don't want to take it to physics. I'm glad you did it.
Well, so I help my friends tend bar make drinks all the time, and like, all right, we're going to cool our drink, and they're like, great, how do we not water down our drink? I'm like, well, if you're going to cool your drink, you're going to also heat your ice cubes. This is how it works. No, 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 no. There is a way to cool a drink. Yes, not by putting ice cubes in it, though. It is a transfer between the two of them. It was so hard to explain this to people that have all been through eighth grade science.
Conservation of energy, conservation of momentum, Newton's third
Yeah,
law.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
funny. Anyway, I'm glad we got that out of my system because this was more of a confessional than in like an actual disc. And I don't even like by the time this gets out on YouTube or anybody listens to it, I have no idea. This might have just been a little blip, but it was a funny coincidence because there was one particular piece that I actually think is well written and like the spirit of it, I totally agree with and endorse. It's just, it does feel like this one I don't think is in bad faith. I think it's in good faith, but I felt like it was really, it was narrowing and flattening an idea in order to build space for another idea, which to me is silly. And again, it does betray that you're kind of misunderstanding how change and adaptation happen in general, from a
right.
complexity perspective. Then at the same time, this other thing I just happened to see on LinkedIn, just a little post from someone I'm connected to and I think is very smart and I like following this person's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But, I kind of felt myself wondering, gosh, I'd like to know a little bit more about what's behind this cryptic call out, on the term of
Yeah,
adaptation. And I don't really actually want to ask because I don't necessarily really want to get down the rabbit hole on some of it. So by the time this
right.
is out there, I don't know if any of this will be
I've
relevant.
seen
It
this.
might have been just a little blip.
I've seen it going on for a couple months
Oh, have you? Is this like
myself.
a growing wave of
It
anti-adaptation?
seems to be. It's not within the complexity community.
Yeah.
I was primarily seeing it in response to what's happening in Gaza,
Mhm.
or just
Okay.
it was mostly women of color that I was
Okay.
seeing posting things saying
Okay.
the expectation for
Yes.
me to
Yes.
to take care of my own mental health cannot be to adapt to the world we're living in right
I'm
now.
glad you said that because I've seen that. Well, I would say I've seen that. I actually feel like that's been a growing understanding and a
Hmm.
well overdue and much needed and appreciated calling out of,
Yeah.
on a broader sense outside of just complexity and system stuff like you said, just what we ask of humans in
Right.
these times. So
Yeah.
it's a good point. What's, I guess maybe now that you've said that, I'm like, oh, okay, so what's interesting here is the bleeding through of the word adaptation and adapting from larger social contexts. There's like the old biology origins, and then also the complexity and complex systems kind of thinking stuff. So it like the word learning, which also is a word that like at this
Yeah.
point never belonged to any of us. And it pains me how I think most people do not think of the word learning the way that I think learning really is. We just need another word. I mean, and I like semathesy.
Mm-hmm.
I like it, and it's probably my go-to. It would be the replacement for both adaptation and learning in the way that I'm generally often talking about it and writing about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the explaining semathesy, it needs a little explanation, and the process by which you take someone through the lead up to semathesy, by the time you get there, it's almost like you don't even need the word anymore because you kind of already grok what it's all about. Of
Yeah.
course, the word is a great shortcut at that point, but for an audience that is, not at all acquainted with Nora Bateson's work or any of these ideas,
Yep.
Gregory Bateson or anybody, semathesy's no better. It's worse because everyone's like, I don't know what that is. So
Yeah. It sounds like a made up.
common, what's in,
Right.
in the common tongue. We don't have
Yeah.
a good one. So
No. No. I think there's something I think healthy about the calling out of adaptation, though. The same way that when I started following Antoinette Carroll and Dory Tunstall's work,
yeah.
I now gut check myself when I think about research as being extractive,
Mm-hmm.
or about like I was just in a conversation today where somebody was saying we need more young people in here. It's like, well, are you saying you need to get things from young people, or are you saying you want to offer things to young people? Because those are two different things. That gut check of extraction is kind of innate
Yeah.
now, and I love that and owe it to the two of them. Thinking about adaptation that same sort of way when I'm advocating for it, to kind of have that gut check that says, am I just asking people to swallow heavy pills?
Yeah. Well,
Is
and
worth a moment of thought.
absolutely. Like that's exactly what I've taken away from this is I realized it was a blind spot for me in the sense that I already do
Mm-hmm.
that. And when I think of adaptation, it's always at least the kind you want to support. It is the mutual, right? It's not the one directional. But to realize that that is still something that needs to be called out and that there are people for whom that is a novel concept. So it just pains me that we have to call it that versus other forms of what it is. But it's very much, that's why I say it's welcome. And
Right.
even the one example, and by the way, if anybody's listening to this, I'm being cryptic just because I feel like I haven't had a chance to talk to any of these people. So I wouldn't really want to talk about their ideas but if anybody's listening and like doesn't know what we're talking about, just message one of us and we'll send you links. But I do think that there's a worthwhile, good faith version of engaging and asking about or interrogating some of not just the words, but and to me in this case, what is worthwhile is not indicting the word, and it's more
Right.
everything we just said about what you're actually asking people to do versus what you're trying to support people being able to do if they want to on their own terms, and knowing it's a mutual process. But that's different also from the folks who are truly like, I got a bone to pick because I got to make sure that I make someone upset. So I'm in the algorithm, or, I'm out here planting a stake and, got some eyeballs on my next book or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So,
That's it. That's our sort of, we need to get to the language is not unrelated to our search engine optimization and our large language model relationships, where they don't know anything other than the context of just the words we're using. Not the context, just the actual words, the ordering of the letters that we're
coherence
using.
of the words to each other,
It's
but not the truth of
yeah,
within them.
it's training us to just lock into words and phrases the same way it operates, when we know that we synonyms are not really a big problem for us. We should be able to say complex and complicated interchangeably in most cases, but
Yeah.
now we're like, ugh. Syntax is a problem for machines, not humans, but it's becoming a human problem.
Yeah. That is a very interesting statement. Probably let's end on that, because I was going to say I've got to run shortly, and that's a good mic drop moment. Maybe a place to even pick up next time.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. All right, let me hit stop.
Cool.